My name is David Whitacre, Whitacre. My personal cell phone number is 312-550-6797, and my personal email address is D as in David, B as in boy, W as in white, 1980 at outlook.com. That's dbw1980 at outlook.com. The purpose of this short video is to protect the field. There's a concept in golf that golfers are familiar with, that when you're playing with a partner in a tournament, that you're the one who's supposed to watch your partner and make sure that your partner follows the rules in order to protect the whole field, not just you. So the purpose of this video is to try to protect the field. Simply put, I'm the owner of a 2011 Boxster Spider, and at some point I started looking at the idea of enhancing the performance of the car. I saw some pretty slick videos on YouTube regarding a turbo system. My first thought was, boy, that would be a real mistake, you know, to be stupid enough to do some aftermarket thing to a Porsche, nullify the engine warranty, etc., and that probably is a slippery slope. That's the very first thing I thought when I looked at that. But the more I saw, the more I looked at the videos, the more I studied, the more things I looked at on the internet, etc., the more credible it seemed. I won't mention any specific names like TPC Racing and AccuMoto. But TPC Racing was the manufacturer of the turbo kit, and AccuMoto is a speed shop in Wisconsin, higher-end Porsche shop that was acting as a local dealership, so to speak, or installer. So I did my due diligence. I researched it. I looked at everything there was. I talked to those folks. I talked real specifically with AccuMoto. I drove to AccuMoto's site, and slick, high-end, remanufactured 911s that were selling for $300,000 or $400,000. Supporting a racing team, etc. Just all the right bells and whistles. But I will say this, that in my business life, especially on the south side of Chicago, I've actually seen a couple of professional con men up close and personal. They are extraordinary animals in the jungle. You may think you're street smart, you may think you've got a nose for things, you may think you've got really good instincts, but you do not know a con man when you see one, because they're that slick. They will get over on you in ways that you don't even understand. I've been up close and personal with two of them. Both of them ended up in the federal penitentiary. They got by me. They were that good. And I can tell you that the folks at AccuMoto are some of the best con men along those lines that I've ever seen. And TPC Racing's right with them. I ended up investing in a turbo system. It was installed. The car ran brilliantly for a few hours. And after I drove it back to Chicago, it completely imploded. It belched black smoke, it stopped working, the car wouldn't start, etc. And when I contacted AccuMoto about that, they basically threw up their hands and, I don't know what you want us to do. Obviously we can't ship your car back to us. We don't, that's not what we do, etc. So the tone changed pretty quickly. I took the car to my faithful mechanic here in Chicago, George. He put it up on the rack and basically just said, I guess I don't know how to say this to you, David, but these are not performance products. There's a hose that collapsed. Think about the dryer hose, that's on your dryer in your house. He said that's about the quality of the hose that was on there. It's cheap plastic, cheap rubber. It's not performance grade stuff. And simply went about trying to remodel it and trying to fix it. The car continued to have problems. It continued to belch smoke. It continued to overheat. I tried to get it out on the track a few times. That was the purpose of upgrading it, obviously, and had problems there. Well, I was black flagged many times because of the amount of smoke coming out of the car. There was clearly heat problems with it as well. So George did his best to try to adapt, what was done to the car to keep it running. And what happened eventually was that the exhaust system that came with the turbo kit, the heat was so tremendous that it caused, expansion to occur, which pulled the pipes underneath the car. And when the pipes pulled back underneath the car, it melted the rear bumper. At that point, I got confrontational and ended up taking TPC Racing to the Attorney General's office in Maryland, I believe it was, or wherever they're based, and gave them a bloody nose. They had to write a check for $3,000 in order for me to be able to replace the rear bumper, etc. And 4 or 5 years later, my motor blew, the transmission blew, and when it came time to think about adapting the car and reimagining it, I asked my friend George, what he would do, and he said, well, there's only one engine builder in the country that really understands this stuff front and back, and that's Jake Raby. So that was good enough for me because George knows the score. So I called Jake directly, and he was direct, straightforward, to the point, as was I. And he actually remembered George, surprisingly, out of the hundreds of students that he has. I remembered George well, and we both kind of agreed that anybody who knows George is okay. So Jake and I got along from the outset. But I did tell Jake that I had been burned really badly by TPC Racing and that I had shoved their nose in a big pile of dog shit as a result. And he was skeptical. He didn't want to, be dealing with somebody who was a hothead, and I assured him I wasn't. But sometimes scores needed to be evened, and that was a time that it needed to be. So Jake agreed to work with me. He built a motor for the car. He interfaced with LN Engineering here in Illinois, in Momence, Illinois, Charles Navarro, and they tag teamed together. And they, I guess the simple way to say it is, I've never seen someone professionally humiliated as much as I watched TPC Racing and AccuMoto be professionally humiliated. By the time that Jake and his crew, Judd and family, finished the motor on that car, by the time that Charles Navarro and Steven and Andy and the people that work with him finished the high performance modifications to the car as well, the car is literally a masterpiece. It's literally a masterpiece. I'm breaking in the engine right now. It's a poem. I got on the highway yesterday morning in my 2011 Boxster Spider. There was a GT2 RS late model in front of me, probably a $400,000 car, I would guess. Orange, big gull wing, California plate. I know Jake would like that one. And anyway, he and I had a discussion on the highway, and we took off at one point. We had one lane clear. He was ahead of me, and we got on the cars, and going up to about 115 miles an hour, we were neck and neck. And then when we broke 115, I started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger in his rearview mirror. It was very clear which car was faster. He kind of floated off and took off on the next exit after that discussion. The amount of work that had to be done to my Spider to resurrect it from the damage that TPC Racing and AccuMoto had done to the car is hard to describe. The amount of heat that was created by the turbo destroyed so many of the components in the car. It melted things. It caused rubber and sealings to fail because of the excess heat. They had removed a lot of the original equipment to adapt, to the turbo. By the time the turbo was removed, it was obvious that it was just a cheap piece of plastic, and it had locked up long before, and the turbo had not been working for a long time. So that was a $13,000 heist as far as I'm concerned. And I had to pay several $1,000s in order to just restore the car to get it back to the point where it could operate properly. That's the amount of damage that took place as a result of those entities. I cannot put into words the contrast of the car now. Everything is completely high performance. The engine sounds like a New York Symphony, and it's an absolute joy to drive, and it's a lot faster than the turbo ever was. So if you have been exposed to those people, TPC Racing and their antics and their cons, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. There's only one way out, and that is to get your checkbook out and spend your way through it to try to resurrect the car and bring it back and make an investment in the right way to get things done. I feel honored to have been able to work with Jake and Charles. I feel like I'm the one who's benefited from their skill sets. The car is a supercar, basically, at a third of the price. So if you have any questions at all, I'll be happy to talk with you personally about it. I'll be happy to email pictures of the damage and the collapsed tubes and the melted bumpers, et cetera, et cetera. This is not just idle talk, it's a fact. And I will certainly make an effort to protect the field on this issue. So please feel free to contact me. Thanks.